Yes, Pastor.
He's talking about the first century churches, which were probably he's talking about Sunday evening, they were gathering together around the meal. The meal that probably started with the Lord's Supper, and they invited the people. Different sets of people they invited. So he gives the three. There are three theses that he is giving, which is quite a bit of good understanding. So what happened around the Lord's Supper? Lord's Supper, and how they even gathered to give to other poor people who are there in the other house churches or other poor people and things like that. So, he says it went on for 3-4 hours around the meal, and they called all friends and all those kinds of things. Then the thesis 2 is talking about teaching and preaching. Teaching and preaching, how it happened, and everybody was participating. People were participating. People were. It was very interactive. It was, everybody was participating. He has given some specific principles on that, and also he has mentioned about the need for skilled teachers, like the apostolic ministry team, Timothy, and all those people also, and whatever way they did it in some form, they also contributed to the teaching. But it was mostly, it was a Socratic discussion and dialoguing. We call argued or dialoguing. So then the other thing is songs, hymns, and spiritual songs, talking about the worship aspect of it. And he's comparing with what is happening in the present day churches. And then one of the things is they're mainly talking about the spontaneous expansion. Expansion. Because he started out with saying that the three main movements: cell movement, house church movement, and saturation movement. And he's saying all these. There are some shortcomings in all these three movements. So he is referring back to the historical church. Then he's talking about network of churches, how they form the network in different cities. And he starts with Antioch, and then Ephesus, then Rome. These are the three places that he's talking about. And the church is probably where around 50 people, 40 people, 25 people, all those kind of networks. The complex network of churches. This is, in essence, he's talking about how he's talking about the three traditions. One is Antioch tradition, then Alexandrian tradition, and another something he's telling, Carthagian.
Carthagian, yeah.
Different traditions, how it came, and how the Western theological tradition came, and Roman Catholic Church came. All those things he's talking about. Yeah, so he's saying that the global South, as they are kind of seeing a lot of growth and multiplication. He wants to see leadership is established, the churches are established, and so this is the idea of the first century church meetings and the network of churches.
Okay, Pastor. Thank you. You covered it very well, summarized very well. Pastor Joseph, anything to add?
Something what Pastor Stephen said. There is a book that is that they discovered, The Way of Christ and His Apostles, and based on that book, James Dunn has written another book called Quest for the Historic Church. The secret is a quest for historical Jesus, and he talks about how we can decode the secrets of the seekers from this book, Way of Christ and His Apostles, and they found that what is written in certain things is the gathering of the early church. One thing is that. Second thing is they're meeting at the Lord's Supper, preaching and teaching. Then courses, psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Then meeting throughout the city in small groups in house churches, and that is the heart of spontaneous expansion. Without training them to expand, the church is expanding spontaneously. And the Robert Banks says that the meeting was always around a meal in their home. So that is one thing that is.
Yes, Raju.
Made the church spontaneously expand. So there's a connection between the spontaneous expansion of the early church and the simple gathering together of the community of believers on the first day of every week around this evening meal, which they celebrated their new life in Christ, which attracted the others to join, which included their friends, co-workers, relatives, and their acquaintances. So that we can see when all of them have their testimonies to share. That is what we find during the persecution, during the Jerusalem church persecution, when the believers were scattered. Wherever they went, because of that very close fellowship with the believers, and because of the great stories that they heard throughout the meeting, they are accustomed to share their testimony. And we can also see that Paul evangelized strategic cities. That is another reason the reason why the church expanded so quite speedily, because he evangelized strategic cities throughout the core of the Roman Empire, and with an eventual thing to establish the main hub in Rome and eventually go to Spain from there on. So another thing is that the individuals and the church continuously permeating the surrounding areas, planting new churches, which is that he made some hubs in major parts, and from there he expanded to the other place. And they had an apostolic team who used to travel from place to place, and the apostolic authority was there. That's also a key factor in serving the doctrines and even the right leadership that they could give because of the apostolic team that they had. And apart from that, Paul used to write letters and grounding them in kerygma and didache, the proclamation and the ground is the establishment by didache. So you can say that they were in a sense charismatic communities, and the key elements apart from the apostolic teaching, breaking of bread, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer, they were one thing. They were gathering always around the meal and having fellowship from house to house. That you can see right from the start. So that fostered single-mindedness and the group mentality and the synergy that they developed because of the close fellowship. And you can see that another thing that contributed to the expansion is the way they taught and they preached and taught the word of God. During simple meetings, mostly in small houses, they never had corporate worship, but in small meetings, in an informal way, they, unlike today's sermon, it's more of Socratic discussion where they used to dispute and dialogue with each other, and the people used to get even though Paul had the Greek mentality of the Socratic discussion, people had a real didache, that the didache that they explained, and that the teaching really went into their heart. And moreover, I was quite astonished that one thing that they used to ground the people was the songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. And he says the songs are basically the Psalms, which are the psaltery, which is the book of Psalms, and the hymns are actually in response to hymns are sung. Hymns, if you look what are hymns, it's actually in response to the word that they receive. So they gave the word. The hymns are actually the word that they heard, which they made it in a musical format. And the spiritual songs, what he says is the contemporary style or that is relevant to the culture. That is the spiritual songs that they sang. So this is another. There was no organ or choir master like what we see in the mid-centuries and later, and no worship leaders and guitar and all that. But it's all about very the meaningful words which they use, and all these they are singing to each other, and that is actually songs are one thing that mostly even the terrorist organization use. Even many of the business houses use these songs, because I was connected with many of the marketing. The first thing that they do, they come together and sing a song, and then only they go for marketing. So that actually gives a real encouragement to all the guys to go out. That's the way they all go out and get the going to the market. So this is songs actually, songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. So psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, that is actually great. You can say a great impetus to get around and expand into different areas. Then the other thing was, like Pastor C-Dmin said, they had the clusters, modules, and hubs and connectors. So they had a scale-free network complex. Even though it was complex, it was actually, you can say, one way, it was very, very simple. It was not like what we see today. We have made it so complex that nobody understands anything. And in those days, it was very, very, you can say it's very, very simple and at the same time complex network. And they had a clear idea about the churches that they had. And they used to send teams of people. You can see that right from Antioch. Antioch was one of the first church hubs where you can see people being sent to other places. And you can see another hub in Ephesus where you can see Apollos, Aquila, Priscilla, and even Timothy. And you can also see that John in the book of Revelation talks about the 7 churches which are in the Ephesus hub of Ephesus. But nevertheless, Rome was the largest hub or the connector, and Rome actually had the authoritative role in having a lot of churches. It says that by 2050 AD there were 446 presbyters in Rome, and 15 to 23 titular parishes, and 2 to 3 presbyters in each church, and that's quite a a very, very strong network of churches. That is, they started at probably after 180 AD only. The system of bishop and all that emerged, and the whole thing took another turn altogether. Then the another method that they use was the house church communities. So in that they use 3 models. One is the oikos model, and another is the philosophical school where the house church or the house circle is centered around a person or a teacher, and the mystery cult that they had secret traditions and sacramental rites and cultic pictures and all that is the third type, and the fourth type was the community that was mostly they attracted the slaves and the freed persons of masters. So that is the 4-way the house communities grew in a great pace. So these all methods actually they adopted gave a good lot of impetus for the churches to grow and multiply. So this is what I found, that even though there are many of the historical techniques method, I think these are the main points that I found that which are useful even for today. If we can adopt these systems, I think the churches can grow in a great pace. Thank you, Pastor. That's what I wrote.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Joseph. Elijah, would you like to share something?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, sorry for joining later. I was struggling to just set my system up. Uh, this article was really interesting for me. And after reading the article, I think uh, I'm just surprised or at analyzing where we have reached as a church and how did we start off. All the core tenets like the meal, the psalms and hymns, teaching and preaching. I think we have moved like way far away from it in our present structure. So it was very eye opening for me, and even as I read this article, just I was thinking that how or it brought to light all of Acts competencies that we did. So what are the keys of the establishment and expansion? So I could see, okay, these are basically the keys. And I was just thinking when I wrote my competency, how much importance did I put for the meal? Or how much importance did I put for psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, which I did not, because I had a totally different mindset while writing that competency. So that was one thing that struck me at the foresight. Also, from Acts, we were reading about forms and patterns, and this article further opened up like what are the forms and patterns that we are stuck to within our church setup, and how they can be detrimental at times. So even like, sir, let me go step by step. Okay, the meal. I think how they put it up, the meal is really core to the meeting within the church, because it sets up a simple, effective, interactive family home environment. It brings one-mindedness and so on. These are just few notes that I had written while I was reading the article. Let me also put it up here. Okay. Then he points out that the meal extras of the meal were sent out to poor in the city or other networks which formed communities. So the meal automatically set the church as a benefactor community, where we are not just focused on us, but it is always other centric.
That was mind blowing, no? To see. It's very powerful it was.
Exactly. So here, I was just imagining, our church setup is like we meet in a hall, but no one knows what we do here. But and here, automatically the extras are sent forward, and then people know the church is meeting here, and there is a community like this which provides food, and that opens up places where people can join in. The meeting was open to others beyond the local church, so people could just come in for the meal, and the meal is what draws people in, and they come to know. During the meal, they find out so many other revelations. So, thankfully, I was, even though not given in this article, you had shared with me Robert Banks' book, that 1.5 hour. Uh, where it is from the viewpoint of this one person who comes for the meeting. So I was able to link uh, aspects from that story and what's being talked here. So it was really eye opening. That was on the Lord's Supper. Then the teaching and preaching, we have moved into a place where uh, the teaching and preaching is, so everything revolves around the sermon in most of the churches, even in our church. Like even though we are open to many things, but the core of the meeting is the sermon. Everyone looks what is the main message that we'll draw out. Whereas in the first century church, it was mostly interactive. So I think how we conduct our carousels is what the church would function mostly, where you would have discussions and people would have dialogues between one another. There would be disputation and things like that. So that's, and there would be an informal aspect of teaching and preaching, and at times there would be formal aspects of teaching and preaching, which is where special teachers would, the traveling teachers would come into a local church, and then that would be the formal event, but you will have informal occasions of teaching and preaching all the time as well. The next was psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. Again, we have, so they showed very clearly how it went from everyone being a participant to slowly it changing to choir and only supporting songs during the communion, and people becoming audience and so on. So they clearly showed the transition of how it went, and then going back, it was like everyone is a participant. It's not like a few selected people lead the other group into worship, it's basically everyone comes with something to bring, and that could be a song, it could be food, it could be experience that you're going through, and then just encouraging one another. uh, and finally, the complex network of early churches, and how he got, or how Jeff linked with the linked idea of science of networking, and how Paul's networking strategy is not only known in the area of church planting, but also in networking strategies throughout. So that was very interesting to see how it was connected: nodes, clusters, hubs, connectors, hierarchies and communities, scale-free network, complex networks. So yeah, this article was really nice. I would love to spend much more time reading this and trying to see where we are going away, and how we can come back to, or at least even not come back. Let's see how we can take those key ideas and bring it to our setup. So for me, this was really a really good article.
Mhm. Thank you, Raja. That's nice. The way you applied it and spoke. Um, Anybody else would like to? Pastor John, would you like to share something?
Pastor, I'm not actually. In fact, I read the whole thing about the church. What is that? Church of the first century, and I came to understand certain things that Jeff was trying to tell us, that we need to go back to the initial first century to understand, and also to look at the way in which Paul was establishing the churches. So he was actually interested to find out in the late 20th century how the churches expanded such an enormous way, rapid expansion that came through cell movements and house movements and saturation movements. So that is something that we really are actually, in fact, practicing right now in New Life. And when Jeff is writing about all these things, we can correlate with our own work. I mean, things that we do. But only thing is that certain things like the spontaneous expansion, the early churches, the 6 points that is written on the first day of the week, the gathering of the early churches, the meeting of the Lord's table, preaching and teaching, then psalm, hymns, and spiritual songs. Yes, that we also actually have spontaneous worships at times in the church. Also, we have worship leaders or worship pastors taking over and maybe making new songs and all those things. And then having meetings throughout the city, and then all those things we also practice in some way or the other. Maybe not as just Jeff has written in a very systematic manner. Maybe we are not doing that. But then I was more interested in the last part where he's written about the hub of churches, where activity was concentrated either in Antioch or in Ephesus, and how that particular center of activity was directed to different places. I believe that that was actually more touching to me, how using a center, how Paul went to, when Paul used different leaders to go and start different churches from one center. So that is actually something that maybe I need to maybe little more dwell in deeply, because I was attracted to that more than all these psalm hymns and all those things. Okay, that is all okay. That is all what we do normally in the churches. But this particular aspect of maybe having a hub and maybe doing a church planting in and around a hub. If now I was thinking about Chennai, maybe in Chennai, maybe I could actually, in fact, have maybe a place of controlling the whole activity from one place and start different churches around the place where I stay, or where we have the church, and have maybe branch churches around where leaders can be chosen and sent for different works around. So even when Pastor Gopi came last week, he had come here. Prophetically, he spoke about the book of Philippians. He spoke from the book of Philippians, and he was talking about Lydia's, that church needs to maybe raise up Lydia's who would start churches around. So I just believe that maybe this material that you have given us, Pastor, and what even what Pastor Gobi came and shared prophetically, I was excited because there is a correlation between these things. And when you said that you are also planning to come on 30th, I am excited where actually, in fact, this particular church movement can come to a rapid expansion program if all the people in the church join together and work together. We will definitely see a rapid expansion. What Jeff is talking about, because Jeff is not bringing any new theology here. He is taking what is actually been done by Paul, and he is trying to teach us or maybe show us the first paradigm. I mean, this is the paradigm that he was following, and we need to change our system or our paradigm to match what was done in the early church, which I believe that things will definitely straighten up. We will be able to see a rapid expansion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Daisy, do you want to contribute to this discussion?
First, most of it is spoken, but one sentence that really like mind blowing was, it was a community that was understandable even for the pagans. Like, even if an outsider came, they could feel at home. They never felt that they are at a strange place. Or and one place in Acts somewhere it mentions that people wanted to join this community. People wanted to follow the ways of the people of the way. So that was like very good. And actually, because of the first principles only, we introduced testimony Sunday in our church, no? So that testimony Sunday, actually and because of that accountability Bible study from James,
Mm.
people are coming forward and sharing. Like, the biggest service is the testimony Sunday, because everybody comes and shares something. So that thing is there, no? If you have a hymn or a psalm or a word of encouragement or something, that will, so everybody contributes. So that, but it happens only once in a month. So I don't know how we can change that paradigm, but it is it is really good. This first century model is really very good. Like, we are looking at, focus on music, sound system, everything, but here they are focusing on nothing but fellowship, pure fellowship, food, and even the fellowship meal. Actually, people long for that. How many times many people in our church has said, let's do potluck and all those stuff. So I think people are willing for that. They are longing for that. So.
Okay. So, Daisy, you can see that some of these things we had adopted some time back in so many areas. Of course, still we are paradigmatically very far away from what is it. So, I'm going to share a summary. Shruti, if you want to share, you can share. Otherwise, I will share off a summary. If you'd like to share, you can share.
I don't have anything new, Pastor. Everyone has shared all of those regarding
Okay.
me and even relating, like how now if anyone comes into our church, for them many things will be different or alien kind. But in that community, everyone was willing to come in and
Mm.
they were able
Your
to
voice is very low. Is
That's
it
what,
only for
no, no, no. It's all because of her sitting away from the mic. That's all.
No. Mic is here only, the same distance. She's
okay,
speaking
okay.
very lowly.
So there everyone was able to relate to what is happening in the church community, and even the church was able to accommodate all others. But nowadays, what happens in the church is not able to accommodate newcomers.
Okay.
One more thing I would like to add. I think the key was keeping it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas church now we have made it so complex that it's like, even though we say it's simple, it's complex because you have to spend time planning and engaging. So just by reading this, and I think it's been something for us also throughout time, our pressure has reduced from the Sunday service to other things. And so the Sunday service, it's okay if the songs are not sung properly or if there is not sing. It's fine. It doesn't, in the long run, it does not make too much of a difference. What
Mm-hmm.
matters is like people gathering and fellowshipping and reading of the word and other things. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, all of you, for sharing. I'm going to now do a fast roundup of all that and what actually Jeff was trying to say. Okay. So you can, by the way, if you are continuing in your MN, you have preaching and teaching as a full module. You have shepherding and counseling as a full module. So all of many of these things that we are studying in very bare minimum, they are full modules with 5 units and everything. All right. So the key that Paul talks about here about the church of the first century is that it is a spontaneously expanding church that becomes a network of churches. That's what he's trying to say. And then he kind of critiques the current setup. He kind of critiques it, saying how the current Western institutional model is failing, and America has moved to post-Christian state, and he blames this on going away from what Paul had instructed. So after the critique, what most important I feel that we need to see, and I don't, I think some of you captured it, but I think the most important thing here that we need to observe is what is Jeff trying to say? Jeff is saying that, and it's there in the, though it's called the churches of the first century, the punchline is, what is the punchline? What is the punchline he says? The punchline for this topic, from simple churches to complex networks. And that's the key. So here it is, what we are going to do. Simple churches. This is the basic foundational aspect of we eventually coming to the place of complex networks. Okay. This journey is what he's explaining in this whole article. But he says, unless our churches are simple, you cannot get an apostolic complex network that is powerful and impacting. Okay, so the idea of simple churches, he said, is 3 factors that you need to be. It needs to be a meal. It needs to be informal. It needs to be a place of sharing. It's a place of concern. It's a place of and the meal makes it significantly a feeling of a family, serving, sharing. All of those things make it very simple. There is no complexity at all in the idea of church. And I hope, and it was my hope that when I shared with all of you, some of you have read, some of you didn't read Robert Banks' article. It's a brilliant article. If you read that, you kind of get to all that Jeff is trying to say, actually. So what is my learning I take away from this? My learning is very simple, that if you are wanting to have a far-reaching, spontaneously growing, spirit-led, powerfully influencing network of churches, we got to build on the idea of simple churches. When we say simple, it is family, it is caring, sharing, not complex, just a meal. It's just a meal, sitting together, having a meal together. Okay. And after the meal, there is something of preaching and teaching. Preaching and teaching, basically, where after the meal, they would sit together and there would be a discussion. It is dialogical. Dialogical. There is sitting and thinking through the scriptures. They're very, very key for them. And one of the ways that they did that or responded to the teaching was through hymns, psalms, they use hymns and new songs. So this is the simple church. So the question that we have to ask is, are we having simple churches? Are we having a church where you can invite a friend, a colleague, and they would come and they would not feel it any different than coming to your house for a meal? But as they take part from the meal, they are able to see and experience something, because as you take the bread and you break it and you give it, you share about Jesus. And the kerygma or the gospel is clearly presented through not just the preaching, but by the fact of and there are elements that are seen. There is a beautiful word actually in this article itself. They had used, and I'm not able to recollect that exactly. Very beautiful one word they used about simple churches. That these acts, the communion and all helped in making things very easy for them to understand. So when the body was broken, they can see the body is broken. That Jesus' body was broken for us. The cup, the covenant, everything, the elements were simple. And it made it easy for the people who are visiting to understand and experience Christ in a very caring, loving, nurturing environment. So simple churches, and the focus is on the meal. So they had a broke bread, they had apostles' teachings, they had fellowship, and they had prayers. So all of that happened around a simple meal. So once we establish simple churches, the journey to complex networks is pretty easy, because this church would multiply. You would have 2 churches. And this church would go on to having more churches. So the multiplication of churches is possible and truly will happen only if our churches are simple. Okay, and it is very, very organic. It happens naturally because people keep coming to the meal, hearing the gospel, they become part of it because it's a very family environment. Once this becomes a large number of churches, some of these churches become hubs. That means one church is able to have massive number of churches that are coming out of this. So this church serves as a hub church. And then you have the nodes. The single church is a node, and several nodes add together to form clusters. And then there are hubs and connectors. So that concept of nomenclature that is used to explain the churches, it's nice. It's good to understand and see how Paul probably viewed it in terms of it. And we know that the 3 hubs were Antioch, Ephesus, and Rome. For us, based on the evidence we have, Antioch is a beautiful explanation. Ephesus has a completely different way of seeing things, and Rome has a completely different way of seeing. But these were hub churches, and it's amazing as you study how these churches operated and functioned and what they did, you kind of see how we need to, as a church, operate. So if there are no simple churches, then you won't get the spontaneous expansion. And if you don't get the spontaneous expansion, you eventually will not become a complex network. A complex network is not in that it is very complicated. In that it has this whole idea of hubs and connectors and nodes and the clusters and things like that. It is automatically evolving into something that is like a network, and that network has got different key areas that they are functioning with. So and if you notice, everything is cities. Everything is cities. And what I'd like to focus on is the simple church gathered around a meal. Which probably you are going to do another encyclical called The Gathering. You will probably read in detail. As they met around this meal, this is the only place there was a man and a woman sitting together. There was a Jew and a Gentile sitting together. There was a master and slave sitting together. There was a rich and a poor man sitting together. Under the sun, at that point in time, there was no other place other than the church meal where all of these people came together. This was the researchers have figured out that this gathering around a meal in this fashion of the different types of people as equal and as one perhaps would have been the single reason for the powerful expansion of the church. And this was only possible around a meal. Only possible around a meal. That is very key to the whole understanding of this article. The secret is you need to have simple churches. How much are we simple? How much are we complex for people? All of those things we need to kind of set right in our churches. How much we can adapt, how much can we move towards the idea of simple churches. So we need to journey to the idea of complex networks. That means to say, the Lord gave us a template in the book of Acts as well as the letters, where we today know Paul, the wise master builder, led by the Spirit, has gone about administrating the ministry, the church, and has a clear view of how churches have to be developed. And so one other thing that I'd like to focus is, when you say church, we all understand it as one location church. One location church. But when the Bible says church, it usually addresses several communities in a significant, large geographic area. In other words, when you say church, it actually would be a network and not a single gathering. That's one key that you need to realize. When Paul says the church at Corinth, the Corinth church had multiple small communities of 30 to 50 to 70 people max. So the idea of church is actually a network of communities. We need to keep that in mind as we negotiate these ideas as we go through this whole article. So we need to capture the idea. Only if we have simple churches will we develop complex network networks, and we are influencing large geographic areas, Now, I'd like to address one more thing before we move to closing the meeting today, is that I'm a little bit confused now. This Antioch, Carthage, and Alexandrian, not significant for us to remember. And the Antioch model is what is biblical. The Carthaginian is law-based, and Alexandrian is philosophy-based. So those were all influenced by the circumstances, but the Antioch remained faithful to the original thing, and therefore we are all in the Antiochian tradition that they call in terms of forming the churches. Now, when you come to apostolic, complex networks, you need to understand that there would be a city, let's say a city here. There is a city here. There is a city here. There is a city here. Okay. So let's say that this is Ephesus. This is Antioch. This is Rome. And this is probably, let's say, Corinth. Each of these have several communities. Several communities. So there would be one major church that would be the hub church mostly in all of these locations. And these churches are going on, these hub churches are going on planting the new churches in that city. Okay. So there are multiple churches in a city, and together they are called the church at Ephesus. And they each have elders. Each have elders and deacons. Elders and deacons. Okay. And so, but there would be an apostolic community, apostolic team that works among the churches, moving among the churches, helping the local pastors in the different local elders in the different areas. This apostolic team also travels to different other cities and they work in establishing the churches. And they have another function is the apostolic team also goes to start a new community. New community. So we have, let's say, another location, let us say Philippi. It is the apostolic team that works in that area of planting new communities. The elders and deacons are focusing on administrating the local community, establishing them, teaching them, correcting them, all of those things. The local community is working with. These elders and deacons have city-based leaders also. City-based leaders are also there. That would be maybe a pastor. Now, we all use pastor very generically, but a pastor would be a person who looks after several of the churches in a city. And the apostle team is more of the missionary team, but they also have fivefold ministries because this team moves to different churches. When they say move to churches, they come to a city and they would help, probably get all the senior leaders together. Like Paul met all the elders of Ephesus in Miletus. Like that, they would meet probably the elders or have special meetings for establishing the church in that city. But the apostolic team functions at a much wider level. The elders and deacons work at a very micro level. So the apostolic team, which I was having a talk with my elders, are we having an apostolic team in the first place? Apostolic is macro, very macro. Elders and deacons function at a very micro level. That means you are working at an individual level. This we are working at a leadership, at in fact, a leadership community level. You don't even reach out as individual leaders. You will be working at this thing. So the apostolic team also constantly adds members to it. And these members are taken from the different churches. The elders don't have a regular addition of members. Once an elders team is established, some of them move out into the apostolic later, but otherwise they will continue there. But they are busy in raising up leaders, maturing them through the teaching, preaching process, and the caring and nurturing process. And when the leaders rise up, they are sent out to form other communities. Now, I want you to know one more thing. Paul in Romans 15, he says this very interesting statement. I have finished my work. I have no place left. No place left. Okay, very famous statement. But he says, and how he says no place left, he says it's all the way from Jerusalem to Illyricum. So this is a large geographic area. The very large geographic area. Now, he says from Jerusalem to Illyricum, I have finished my work. There is no place left for me. That means to say, that means to say that he has planted in strategic, he has made hubs. He has made hubs all across. It is not that he covered every city or town and everything, but he says, my job is done. I'm an apostolic leader. I have established these hubs. I have established these hubs. Now, what will happen is these hubs will grow. These hubs will grow. Can you see this? This picture that I just now made is a very macro view of what I showed here. These are all hub churches, and they are establishing communities around them, and they are saturating the place. But from Jerusalem to Illyricum, Paul actually did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hubs. And that's the model that Paul worked. Jerusalem to Illyricum, I finished my work. There's no place left for me. That doesn't mean to say that there was no place left as in to preach the gospel, but he had a strategic placement of hub churches so that he would leave them with mature leaders who would then grow and influence the community around that church, and in that cities have multiple locations of churches and growing and expanding such that eventually that whole city would know Jesus. Now, I'd like to ask all of you, does this make sense?
Very much.
Yes.
Yes.
So if you don't have simple churches, so my takeaway from this is, how do we now have simple churches? We have such complicated systems, right? How much we need to move towards simple churches, that our churches are accessible to new people.
Can I ask you one question, Pastor?
Yeah, sure, Pastor.
See, it's not that we don't have simple churches. Our churches are also simple only. But my mind is this mind-boggling is actually how did he raise so many leaders?
Pastor, it is because of simple churches. We don't have simple churches. I'll explain to you why we don't have simple churches.
One second. But one advantage that Paul had was there were so many. The initial point of contact was always Jews who were already knowing the scriptures, and they were having a lot of maybe a fair idea what the Old Testament or the teachings of Jesus, teachings of the Old Testament were. They had a fair idea. For our case, actually, in fact, when we are trying to teach maybe the whole, maybe the New Testament or whatever the teachings are there, trying to teach the new people, it may take some more time or maybe more time. I just feel that way, because actually it's not that we don't have, our churches are complex churches, which I don't believe, because we are also having simple churches only.
Pastor, let me explain. Let me explain. So our maybe you're not capturing the paradigm he's trying to say. Today we are afraid even to call people to church because people come there, they see things, hear things which may be very they cannot even understand what we are trying to say. But in the simple church of what Paul had designed, you just come for a meal. There is no other thing happening there. It is a culturally acceptable thing that you are sitting together and having food. So, Pastor, for that you have to read that article, Robert Banks' article, which I had shared some time back. So, the preaching and teaching is also sitting and having it over a tea or coffee, having a discussion. And
maybe I would feel that actually, in fact, what Joseph was doing some time back, some years back, or maybe 2-3 years back, they were having sort of retreats, like 1 week retreats and all those things, where people were called and they were going through rigorous training or rigorous preaching of the gospel for 1 week. There, some of them was actually saved, and maybe some of them dedicated themselves to do ministry and so many other things, which I think might be one of the key areas that maybe I also need to think about. I just feel that.
Pastor, just have simple churches. Very, very simple churches. That people will come, enjoy, get nurtured, and become mature. Very, very simple churches. So that I think is the heart secret in what our man is trying to tell us in this whole picture. And then he says, as these simple churches start to grow, they will grow very fast because very simple. They're not very complicated. People just come, they attend, or they feel comfortable. They keep coming every week, or some of them even maybe every day. They keep coming. They'll share their meal together. They will sit and talk about Jesus. They'll talk about the simple teachings that are there, and people get added, and then they're going out and sharing with some other people. Suddenly another area, another community, they will have a couple of people going there and starting a community there, and it will keep on growing and multiplying. The idea is the simplicity of the church would make it easy for it to grow and expand. Now, for example, in our kind of setting, okay, we will plan a church in Hoskote. Okay, what all we need? We need about 13 lakhs worth of material. We need about pulpit. We need to have speakers. We need to have all of those things. Okay, so Pastor, what do you want to plan a church? No, I don't have 13 lakhs to start a church. You see how complex it becomes?
And I don't actually, in fact, agree to that, because wherever I have planted church, it started with zero, with nothing in hand. I never had even 1 lakh rupees in hand. So what I'm saying is that's what I said, Pastor. Actually, in fact, the training of people, actually, I am telling you, certain times, actually, in fact, my mind gets blown away. Trying to actually, in fact, teach simple things to people, it does not get into their head, especially people coming from Hindu background. I am telling you, it's not easy. We can actually, I've done very, very simple teachings, trying to teach. I'm telling you, sir, Pastor, it is not easy.
Yeah, it is not easy, Pastor. I'm definitely not saying that.
I just saw the way in which Joseph was doing some years back. Now that is gone. That the retreat businesses. I don't know, Joseph, are you still doing it?
No, we don't.
I just want to know, how was that retreat? Was it actually effective?
It was effective in the sense that many people were added to the church, but you can't say it is 100% effective. We have a lot of people added to the church in the time.
Even after actually, even after having people trained for 1 week, continuous gospel in different ways and teaching, making them sit in the presence of God for 1 week, Joseph says it is not very successful. So that is a problem that we are facing.
Pastor, it doesn't happen in 1 week. You cannot have it in 1 week.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen in 1 week.
No, but then actually, in fact, the thing is that they need to have an encounter with the Lord. for them to actually grasp the basic things of life.
So, Pastor, when you say encounter with the
Yeah,
Lord,
Pastor, it's not, again, I'm not here to argue here. I'm just trying to
Right.
tell, because of the difficulties, all these years of difficulties that I have faced, I'm trying to tell you, we have been very, very simple, Pastor. I never had any sort of, no godfathers to provide money to me, nothing. Whatever little money we had, we somehow tried to make a small little room and start giving the gospel. When the money came, maybe we moved to a better place. Things like that. Very, very simple way only we started. Simple meal. We have simple meal every week. All those things we did. But getting trained leaders, it is, I'm telling you, I've really, at times my thing goes away, because all what we teach and preach and all those things, we make them to cluster. We take the Bible, we teach them all these things. It doesn't get into their heads many a times. Maybe learned people, little more learned people, maybe a little bit people who are more learned, for them it is little more easier. But the ordinary people, it is very, very difficult. The Holy Spirit has to work in a mighty way. That's what I have seen.
Absolutely.
And we are actually, I literally cry out to God, Lord, give that person an encounter, that he will have a real encounter with the Lord that is going to change his life.
So,
Because, yeah.
Pastor, here is
tell
a paradigm changing thing. Every person who comes to church is encountering Jesus, because the church is the body of Christ.
I don't disagree to that. Yes, it is. But there is actually, in fact, a level of intelligence, I believe. Certain people, for them, it gets so easily. Some people, though, they accept Christ. Half of them, when we start teaching simple things, even I've seen them sleeping in the half the classes, not able to grasp anything. So it's not that they are not interested; they are interested.
Pastor, do you do dialogical, or you are doing
Dialogue. We make them ask questions. What did you understand from this? Even after telling the whole story, the answers they give, yes, what did I teach right now? Make them repeat 3-4 times. You make them repeat. So I'm just giving an example. Yesterday, I had a session with 2 people. I said, this is eternal life. What is eternal life? Eternal life is not after your death. Eternal life starts the moment you form a relationship with Jesus Christ. I made them take John chapter 17, verse 3, and this is eternal life, knowing the only true God and his Son, Jesus Christ. Make them understand it is all about your relationship with Jesus Christ. After that, I asked that man, what did you understand? What is eternal life? Life after death. What? I'm telling you, these are the things. I'm telling you, these are the ways in which practically I am struggling. It's not that actually I have not done. Almost 15-20 years, we've been actually planting church. Even today, when it comes to new people who have just come to the Lord, it's very, very difficult. Unlearning is one of the most toughest things I've seen. Very difficult. But I will not actually, in fact, I'll put my hands and say it is impossible. If it is possible by Paul, it can be possible by me also. That is what I would console myself and come out. But many times discouragement comes, surely it comes. But then, not looking at what is happening around me, we just press on and move forward. I'm not saying that actually it is impossible. But see, if there was actually some Christians getting saved, they are better off than I would say the Hindu brethren, because they have some sort of an idea or knowledge of what the Bible talks about. Many of them, not all of them, at least some of them. That advantage Paul had, isn't it true? Because some of his key leaders, weren't they Jews? Instead of actually, in fact, taking just heathen people, weren't he actually, in fact, taking all his key leaders as Jewish people? Just putting a thing across. Because the main thing I am struggling is actually, in fact, trying to get people who can understand simple things, not complicated things at all, simple things, which they can really understand and grasp. Which, again, goes back to Joseph, and I would say maybe Joseph's strategy may be better, I would feel. Because maybe getting them for a week and hearing the gospel over and over again, maybe some of them could grasp it better, I feel. I do not know.
Pastor, I agree with you that
practically, yeah.
I agree with you. Temporary community is a fantastic place to learn. of camps and all these meetings are definitely you cut them off from their regular life and their challenges and everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
That definitely that temporary community is a fantastic way of learning experiences. But what we are talking is as they live through their life and face their challenges, the new belief is changing their behavior so that they interact with
So
life.
once a foundation is laid, then actually building on that foundation becomes much more easier. Because mostly what happens is, again, I'm telling you, when they used to meet house to house, was it every day? I think so. Maybe it is every day.
They met every day.
We cannot meet every day because of many factors, like they are working, they got business, they don't have time. We catch them on a week, maybe on a weekend, one day, then on a Sunday. So these are the 2 days where Sundays not much can be delivered. So
Pastor,
maybe
maybe we have to rework our Sundays. That's
what I said. That's what I said. There is some strategical move that we need to do to see that people are established in Christ, first of all. I'm not saying that it is impossible. It is possible. If Paul could do it, surely I can also do it. But what is the strategy? Because when they're meeting house to house, if it is every day, means surely there is actually a greater impact, because people are hearing the gospel every day. Then there is an impact.
Okay, Pastor. I get what you're saying.
I feel that that is one strategy that we miss out. That is meeting quite often. We need to come more often than a week, probably a week or twice a week. I think that is the key, wherein people are just bombarded with the gospel every day and dialoguing, and literally every day they are exposed to the gospel, and their life is in the gospel. Today, half their life is in the world. Half their life is in their workplace. Half their life they're trying to please their bosses. They are loaded with work. 15 hours of work every day. How can you expect them to read the Bible every day? So that is the whole situation today. I mean, the pressures of work is so much that people have no time for anything but please their bosses, or even get on with their work. I think the work culture has really caught up with all the people today.
Yes. Josh, you came a little late. Any questions you have? Any?
So the complex search networks, that thing we are discussing. I mean, did we discuss anything before that, or?
No, all of us were sharing our thoughts, but we basically, this is these two white sheets will tell you the whole story of what we are supposed to do in terms of simple churches becoming complex networks. The simple churches, the very idea of being simple actually makes it easy for growing and multiplying. And eventually, as these churches grow and multiply, some of these churches become hub churches. That means having a lot of nodes connected to it, or that they produce a lot of nodes. That becomes like a very central church. So hub churches are key for networks, and these networks are governed by a complex leadership network also of apostolic teams that are constantly traveling between the cities and between the churches, so that they will equip them for the work of the ministry. The elders, that's a good point that we can write down. What does the elders teach? The elders are primarily, elders are teaching raw congregation. Okay, their job is to predominantly raw congregation, and as they teach them, they are developing people who are leaders. Okay, so this is their job, and of course, the elders have a lot of other responsibility of correcting and presiding over, taking care of the poor in the church. A lot of work is there. Practical works are done by the deacons. The apostolic team comprises of 5 apostles, prophets, evangelists, and pastor teachers. What do they do? The apostolic team. So apostles are predominantly working with opening new locations. Okay, new locations, unreached areas. They're working with the gospel, establishing small communities. Prophets work in a very interesting way. Now, classical picture is Agabus coming and telling Paul, you're going to suffer. That is a prophetic ministry. So he comes and he addresses, he's like the voice of God. To this team also, to the new congregation that is being established, and to the old congregation they are able to minister to. Evangelists are people who are from the apostolic team, works with the apostle to preach the gospel in a new city, helps the elder deacon group, the leaders of the church, to plant new churches locally. They help to plant new churches locally, but in the whole evangelism. Pastor teachers are basically taking care of 3 or 4 congregations, and they help establish these congregations, and also helps in counseling, shepherding. All of those work is done for a couple of churches together in a city. They work with, and they help the elders in their own journeys as well as the other journeys. But these groups, this group functions outside a local church. That means they come into the local church from outside. Elders and deacons are functioning within the local church. They are part of they were taken out from that developing community and established as leaders. As they were taught, they matured and they became elders and leaders. So we need to see that our churches and church networks have very capable, well-taught elders and deacons. And once we are a network of churches, we should have an apostolic team that functions traveling between networks of churches, small networks of churches, teaching the elders and leaders, also having special ministry to the large gathering of several churches together. So we need to have both of these leadership functional in our churches, especially once we become a reasonably big network of churches. So a complex network has a complex leadership structure to facilitate the movement of the gospel, the establishing of the people in the didache happening continuously. So leading to the spontaneous expansion of the church. So the leadership structure also is something that you need to keep in mind as you write this book. All right. I think that was a good discussion. I hope all of you have enough content to write 3 to 4 pages and submit as soon as possible. Okay. Any questions, reflections? So next week, we will do women and spontaneous expansion. Pastor C-Dmin is there, me and he will fight a lot on this. Women and the spontaneous expansion.
So this is 3 and 4, Pastor. Encyclical 3 and 4.
We finished 1, 2, churches of the first century. Then is women and the third one we're doing.
Okay.
Okay, so Jesus to the Gospels, we have finished. I do hope all of you have written and submitted. Churches of the first century, you should submit as early as possible and read women and the spontaneous expansion of the early church. Okay. And so we would have finished 3 encyclicals with that. So next week, even if suppose I'm not gathering, if I'm not available, I'd like one of you to take it up and moderate the session and see that the key topics, like you have done today very well, key topics are surrounded. And probably if I come in on another day next week or something, I will do a review and then do the encyclical for that day. But I don't want us to miss our Mondays. I'm traveling a bit for the next couple of months. Next month, I'm again going to Tokyo for our church there. So I'll be about 2 weeks out. Then I may go to South Africa next year, or the end of the year, we may have some plans also. So though as much as possible, wherever I am, I will have the meeting or at your time. But I also want that suppose I'm not able to attend, still you gather, finish off a discussion, draw out interesting ideas and applications and finish the discussion and write your paper. Remember, you don't have to do resource interaction. You don't have to write ministry reflection. You have to write the implication. That means this new thought and ideas of that you got from this article, how, what does that now mean for you to do ministry? You're not telling about your ministry in general. So the implications you can write. So they are asking only 2 pages. You can write 4 pages. Don't need to, it's very simple. Write it in annotated forms or simple headings and finish it off. Please don't keep material. Now, I have this thing to important show you that we are in bad shape, as you can see. Why am I saying we are in bad shape? We are on what day today? We are on the 10th, right? We are on 10th October. Can you see? We are what all we should have finished? We should have finished Jesus to the Gospels. We did. We are still doing September 29th articles, Church of the First Century. We have not done PTP 1 and PTP 2. We are not done PTP 3. Next week only we are doing October 13th. We all have to meet. Okay. Everybody have to attend October 13th, 9 a.m. US time, 7:30 p.m. IST. It's a major meeting with Jeff and Michael. All of us have to meet. Okay. But so
what time?
That 7:30 p.m. IST is already mentioned there. Okay. So I'd like all of us to finish women in this expansion of the church. And let's see, at least that pace we should go and finish off. Paradigm papers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is very big. Actually, we're supposed to do this parallelly, but I don't think it is going to be possible for all of you to do. But at least every week you're finishing an encyclical. That's enough. That means every week you're reading an encyclical and writing an encyclical. That means now today you finish that the discussion. Tomorrow you sit and write your Church of the First Century simple 2 or 3 page document with simple format. Submit it. Then start reading Women of the Expansion. And as you read, type in all the material, keep it ready. And after our discussion, you can put in an idea and fine tune it and submit it. You understood what I'm saying? If you are, when you have read it, you should have already created a document, Word document. And you polish it after you finish the discussion and submit it in the 2nd or 3rd day after you finish the discussion. Then the next 4 days, you should finish reading the next encyclical. That speed you have to go, otherwise you won't finish the thing. I'd like all of us to get the D-Min, okay? Keep this timetable in mind. That is what we are looking at. Now, next week, when we meet October 13th, we are already very, very short of what they are expecting us to be covering. Now, some of me, like people like me, I finished spontaneous expansion. I finished this one. I finished this one. I finished. So a lot of the other things I finished because I know because I've already been doing this study for some time. But all of you need to put in a lot of work. And the idea is, suppose you are now, somebody told me they're busy for 1 week. No issues. Don't break your head. After that 1 week is over, take 3 days off fully and finish your work. That means you got to find time and place it. You can't give See, our main course, people were so lagged in their thing because we are very busy. We are very busy. Now we got an opportunity to study fast. Where I had made it very clear that September to 19 to January 19, we all have to give our life. We all have to dedicate to reading every day. Otherwise, it won't work. So we should all reach the finish line together. We should all go to Delhi and take our award, doctorate award from Jeff himself.
So then what would be the strategy for the PTPM in the paradigm papers? Do we do it
So
later?
right now, what I would suggest is let's finish the encyclicals and write the TWCA, the main, the way of Christ and the Apostles, the core paper that is there. No, the one major paper is there that we finish it and submit. Then we will work on the paradigm papers. But we are still going very slow. If we had done 2 encyclicals, we would have covered actually. Every week, if we did 2 encyclicals, we would have covered equivalent to covering 1 encyclical and 1 PTP. You're getting the idea of what is the every week. See, every week, what according to their timetable, every week you should have finished September 22nd to September 29. You should have finished Church of the First Century and 2 papers, paradigm papers. So we are supposed to upload both of it in that 1 week time, but we are not doing that. We are reading only 1 article, and these 2 we are dropping out. So what is happening is all of this is piling up. Why am I not doing it? Because I know that even 1 encyclical, you're all struggling to do it. If you can keep the pace, and we read the paradigm papers also, and 3 papers basically you have to read in the week. At CUP, we can finish 3 papers every week, and we'll catch up. But I don't know whether how many of you are willing to take up that kind of reading.